Warhammer 40k Darktide was one of the most anticipated games this year. Its brutal combat, its grim dark aesthetic, and lovable cast of rejects to play as are just a few reasons why I'm excited to finally get to dive in. Now that the game has launched, there are quite a few differences between Vermintide 2 and this new adventure in the 41st millennium. This is everything you need to know to get started. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the game or the franchise, you might be wondering, just what is Darktide? Well, Warhammer 40k Darktide is a horde-based hack and slash game that features co-op play, an arsenal of weapons and cosmetics to collect, and a slick story to carve through. So Warhammer 40k Darktide shifts gears from the previous two games in the Fat Shark catalog to adopt a brand new setting along with new gear, hero, maps, and a big improvement to the gameplay loop. All of these changes were things the developers learned from their time with Vermintide 1 and Vermintide 2. When it comes to heroes in Darktide, well, you aren't one. Instead, you are a reject who is sent involuntarily to serve as an agent of the Inquisition to purge heresy from Tertium, a hive city that is the current target of Nurgle's latest plague experiment. Now, these rejects do serve as the classes you get to choose from. First up, we have the Ogryn, which is a supersized human descendant who just loves to bulldoze anything in its way. If you're someone who loves to live on the front lines or tank or just kind of soak damage, this is definitely the class for you. Next up, we have the Zealot, who places their faith above all and punishes foes in the name of the Emperor. This class is great for those who like to be right in the combat, but enjoy more of an evasion-based playstyle than the Ogryn. Next up, you have the Veteran, who is a former Imperial Guardsman with a sharp eye. If you're an FPS master, somebody who loves to look down the sights, the Veteran is one that I would definitely take a look at. And then you have the Psyker, who draws power from the warp in order to vaporize enemies. If you like magic and sorcery, the Psyker is definitely one that you want to look at. Now, as someone who has played their fair share of Inquisitor Martyr, all of these feel pretty familiar, and they're kind of right on the money for Warhammer 40k. The developer did mention that they are designing these heroes to be less about killing efficiency and more about what they excel in order to create a strong group. So for instance, if you're an Ogryn and you take a Ripper gun, you're going to be able to mow down low-level enemies with ease. But once you run into an armored opponent, that gun immediately loses effectiveness because it can't pierce thick armor, and you need a team member with armor penetration in order to take over. But the largest addition to the game in terms of classes is the new character creator. Now, one of the restrictions Vermintide 2 had was a lack in player choice for the heroes themselves. What you saw is what you got. Now with Darktide, Fat Shark has added a character creator so players can truly create the reject of their dreams. You can choose from different faces, details, and even some backstory for each reject. And while some might think that the appearance options are a little weird, Fat Shark did want to stay true to their vision of what people might look like in the 41st millennium. Now, once you're in the game and you complete the intro, you're going to find yourself in the hub. This is a large circular area that features various vendors, the mission terminal, and a barber in order to modify your appearance. Now, please take note, you cannot change your voice here, so make sure you like it during character creation. Otherwise, you'll have to go and create a different character altogether. So let's talk about these vendors. So first up is the Armory. This is where you can spend gold that you earn on missions in order to purchase gear from a rotating inventory. Now, this inventory will update every 60 minutes, and it can range from gray items to purple items. Now, this is where you're going to be spending most of your currency early on, as it's the most consistent avenue for upgrades. In addition to the Armory, you also have contracts. Now, these are weekly tasks that you can complete in order to earn marks. These marks can then be spent on high-quality gear, including transcendent items, which are orange. Now, if you don't like the tasks that you see, you can definitely swap them out by paying gold, but please be warned, the price will go up each time you swap out a task. Now, once you complete all of your tasks, you're going to earn an extra 1,000 marks on top of whatever you got for completing the individual tasks themselves. So you can complete these tasks on each character you have, so in theory, you could have one of each class and complete these for a guaranteed 4,000 marks, plus whatever you get from each task itself. This is definitely the most efficient way to be able to purchase multiple items from the contract vendor, and this is the most consistent avenue for transcendent gear upgrades. Now, outside of contracts and the Armory, we also have the crafting system, which gives a few different options to mess around with. First, you have Consecrate, which allows you to improve the rarity of an item, and in turn, it gains new affixes and even new perks. Now, this process does cost crafting materials called playsteel and diamantine, which are found out in missions and as a mission reward. So keep an eye out for these materials because they are going to be crucial in late game for upgrading your gear. Now, side note, these materials are shared, so don't worry about fighting over them with your teammates. Now, the other options in crafting currently are not available in the game, so as those become available, look for a future guide that covers the crafting system. So with the vendors out of the way, let's talk about the mission terminal. Now, this is where you're going to pick and choose what missions you want to do, but there is a lot going on here, especially when you first open it up. Each mission has a ranking or a tier, and this is depicted by the number of bars at the top of the mission plaque. The more bars, the harder it's going to be. Now, in addition to this, you're also going to see icons to the right and left of the plaque that show what modifiers that mission comes with. A yellow up or down arrow will indicate whether you will see more or less hordes and elite enemies, and a diamond will let you know if there are scriptures or a grimoire to collect. Now, these are held items that will give you bonus experience if you find them all, and once you end the mission with them in your possession, you'll be able to cash those in for extra experience. And there are some contracts that require you to pick these things up, so again, keep your eye out for them. Then we have the icons to the left. These signify what type of mission it is. You have espionage, where you need to upload fake data to kind of thwart some attacks on the Emperor. You have assassinations, where you need to kill a boss target, strikes, where you need to repair something, and disruptions, where you need to disrupt heretic activities. But if you don't really want to pick and choose what you want to do and you just want to get in and start swinging blades, you can always use quick play. This is going to matchmake you with an existing group at a selected difficulty, but just know that this could put you in a mission already in progress or a brand new one, so please keep that in mind because there is a 50-50 shot at either one of those. So now that we've talked about the classes and the hub, let's talk about missions, including some really cool tips and tricks to help you hit the ground running. So missions are broke into 3 parts: traversal, hordes, and objectives. Starting with traversal, these are the parts of the mission where you're moving from one area to the next. Usually you'll see mobs of enemies. You may have some elites that spawn like poxhounds, mutants, and trappers. These will often spawn behind you in an attempt to sneak up on the party and catch any stragglers and just make life more difficult for you. So be sure to stay aware and stay near each other to avoid any surprises. You don't want to be the guy that's out, going and looting a bunch of boxes and your team's on the other side of the map, and then you get mauled by a poxhound and you're sitting there just watching your health drain because you're not near your group. So long story short, stay near your group. Now, this is a good time to talk about coherency. So this is an aura that surrounds the team, and each member provides a buff to other members when you're near each other. Now, coherency will also replenish toughness, provide damage and survivability buffs, and honestly, it just makes missions easier when you group up anyway. So you don't want to be spread all over the place, especially if you're going from objective to objective in higher difficulties. Now, the second part of missions are hordes. These are high-intensity moments where large groups of enemies sort of basically just begin to pour out of every crack, door, or ledge in the arena. They just kind of like World War Z style, just roll over the edges. Now, this is where you really want to utilize any exploding barrels, grenades, or AoE weapons. That way you can quickly clear out enemies to avoid getting boxed in. This is also where you're going to see monstrosities, extra tough elites, and ranged enemies. Okay, so I've mentioned monstrosities. You're probably wondering, what is that? These are sort of mini boss enemies that can easily wipe a team out if they're not careful. You have the Beast of Nurgle, which is a large slug-like creature. It leaves a trail of acid. It'll bull rush your team. It may even eat a teammate, which takes them out of the fight for a little bit and deals damage to them. And then next up, you have the Plague Ogren. This is a large berserker-like creature. It's going to charge in, swing its arms, deal large AoE damage to the group. And then lastly is the Demon Host. These are incredibly powerful creatures that'll attack you in a frenzy, and if you're downed, they're going to basically force choke you to death, and you'll need to be revived later on. So these are a little bit different. The Beast of Nurgle and the Plague Ogren will sort of spawn, it'll be a big event, and they'll show up, and you need to kill them, and then move on. The Demon Host is almost like the crying girl in Left 4 Dead. So it's going to be sort of just on the map already, and if you get near it and you wake it up, that's when you catch its hands. Like, it starts like freaking out and attacking you and dealing all of this damage. So if you see it on the map, tag it. That way your team stays completely away from it, because believe me, that's a fight you don't want. Now, if you do wake up the Demon Host, do whatever you possibly can to nuke it as quick as possible. Usually the Ogren will absorb the damage, hold his shield up, while everybody else just basically beats it to death, and you hope to survive and move on. So if you do kill it, you get an achievement, so keep that in mind. But that one is incredibly dangerous. Now, for all of these enemies, you really just want to make sure you focus on dealing damage and clearing them as soon as possible, right? Demon Host obviously has an enhanced priority, but the other ones you still want to focus on and try to down because they are still powerful. Now, the last part of missions are the objectives. Now, these are the actual things you need to do in order to progress or complete the mission. These can be things like cracking locks with the cipher, scanning the environment with an auspex, or guarding an area for a period of time. Either way, these are the sections of the mission where you need to stay in an area while you defend against hordes, monstrosities, and elites. This is the point where the game will throw everything it has at you in order to crank up the difficulty and try to get you to fail. Okay, so now that we know about how missions work, let's talk about tips and tricks for surviving these things. 1, don't be greedy with heals and ammo. These are shared resources, and if you have one person taking all of them, the rest of your team will suffer and increase your chances to fail. Number 2, there are certain missions where you need to transport a power core from one point to another. These can be thrown and caught, so use this to your advantage. Have someone stand up near the place where you need to actually insert the power core, have somebody run up and throw it up to them. That way you don't have to go, all the way around or anything like that. Use this to your advantage. Number 3, don't expand beyond the scope of your role. This game becomes much easier if each person sticks with what they're good at. Ogrins for tanking, zealots for off-tanking and supporting, veterans and psychers dishing out huge amounts of damage behind the front line. And number 4, don't forget about using your auspex on servo skull missions. I see lots of new players forget to use this device to complete objectives, which makes missions take longer than needed. You'll see it pop up, it'll say press number 4, use auspex, it'll be a little device that you pull up. You aim it basically like you'd aim a weapon, and it'll show you a little radar. You need to find the glowing objects and then scan those objects by pressing, right trigger or right click or left click rather to shoot, and then you're going to scan it. So make sure to go out and do this as well. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is gear. So in Warhammer 40k Darktide, each reject will be able to equip 2 weapons, 1 melee and 1 ranged, and then also 3 curios. And as you level up, you're going to unlock new weapons and new items. So for instance, you're not going to start out with a flamer on the zealot, but once you get to around level 14, you're going to start seeing that weapon appear in the armory and in mission rewards. Now, for most players, you're going to want to spend a lot of time using melee weapons to carve through large groups of weak enemies. However, that doesn't mean ranged weapons can't be used. In fact, there are some weapons that are built to plow through hordes, things like that flamer, for instance. But because ammo is a thing, you don't want to use it all of the time and risk being out of it once a monstrosity enters the arena. Now, for curios, these are basically little trinkets that give you some secondary stats, things like increasing your toughness, your max health, sprint efficiency, or blocking efficiency. This is where you can fine-tune your build to focus on specific elements like tanking or being a support. Now, starting at Redeemed, which is green rarity, each weapon will come with a perk. And as you climb the rarity ladder, your weapons will gain more perks and eventually blessings, which give bonuses to certain combat elements, like increasing your damage on staggered enemies or gaining a large cleave damage bonus. And at orange rarity, called Transcendent, you're going to have 2 perks and 2 blessings, which is eventually where you want to have all of your gear. Now, this is also where the grind comes into play, because you're going to be chasing those best in slot perks and blessings on all the weapons that you want. Now, there isn't a good weapon and bad weapon. It's really just about your playstyle and what you want. But weapons aren't the only thing that you can customize your playstyle with. You also have feats. Now, these are gameplay defining unlocks that occur every 5 levels. These unlocks are going to grant you large bonuses that help yourself and your team. So for instance, the Zealot has a set of bonuses at level 15 that are going to affect any allies in your coherency, so any allies near you. And that could be things like increasing their power or their toughness. So make sure to choose these to fit your needs, and don't worry, you can freely swap them whenever you want to, so don't feel like you're locked in on one thing forever and always. So folks, that is Darktide in a nutshell. We've covered all of the big ticket items so you can get started the second you log into the game. But just know there are so many more things for you to discover and unlock. This is a game that has something for everyone, so if you find something you enjoy, keep at it. All right, everybody, let me know what you think about Darktide in the comments section below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. This has been Vulkan, and I'll talk to you guys next time.